Welcome to the Writer's Game Podcast, where we help you magnify your voice and monetize your message. And now, let's get into the show.
Welcome to another episode of the Writer's Game Podcast, where we help you magnify your voice and monetize your message. I'm your host, Kyle King, and we are back with somebody absolutely special, somebody impactful, and somebody that I am excited to let you guys hear from today. Her story, phenomenal. Tamela, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fantastic. So before we get into a lot of the strategies, a lot of the breakdown of your story and what makes you super impactful, can you talk about a little bit about what you're working on and how you're using your story to impact others?
Now I'm working on doing group coaching where I help women who have suffered with emotional trauma turn that trauma into healthy habits and behaviors with self-care, and also setting healthy boundaries.
What does, this word trauma, I feel like it's thrown around so often, especially during COVID. I think people becoming more self-aware and reflecting more and actually have time to deal with a lot of the mess that they probably had going on and brewing within their lives. They had some time to think through it and work through it. But how would you define the word trauma?
I define the word trauma for me as things that I have experienced that I know that constantly repeats in my head. Just like the word trigger is thrown around a lot. I triggered you, or that person triggered me, those things. Well, it depends on what it is. Is it something that is deep down that you're not dealing with? Or like you say, is it just a word they're just throwing out there? But for me, trauma, it's something that I notice that I'm having that same repeated pattern of the same things that I keep doing or experiencing.
That brings me to something that I heard recently, actually, about oftentimes the lesson continues to repeat itself until you actually learn the lesson.
Exactly.
In your life, as somebody's listening, I'm sure there's a lot of lessons that are continuing to repeat. What was one lesson for you that you saw a cycle of repetition and repetition and repetition, that it took a lot of time for you to really understand, and now you've been empowered to being able to teach those lessons to other people?
It was how I communicate with others. That was really big for me. If you wasn't agreeing with me, I was angry. And I noticed that it stemmed a lot from childhood, because I believe for me, I saw that's how my parents interacted with each other. I saw how my aunts and uncles have interact with each other, not all of them, but a few. And so I figured, from what I saw, that's how I'm supposed to interact with other people. Until I went through my divorce, and I'm like, wait a minute, they're doing the same thing in my marriage that I saw. So I said, no, I need to check myself first and see what's going on with me before even trying to get into another relationship. And I tell people this all the time: stop trying to hop into another relationship when you need to have a relationship with yourself first before getting into a relationship with someone else, because all of us have baggage. So when you get into that new relationship, you're going to be taking on your baggage. They're taking on your baggage too, but you need to try to fix yourself to make sure you're loving yourself first, and you're setting the correct boundaries for yourself before even trying to involve someone else. Because when we involve other people, we sometimes have children, and then they involve with our issues, and it goes on, and that's where that cycle continues.
Exactly. I think that's so profound what you said. You have to build a relationship with yourself before you're trying to engage in a relationship with anyone else. And that's not just intimate. Anybody that's listening, it's not just your lover. That's, a business relationship, your colleagues, all these other things. You have to understand the baggage, the triggers, all the stuff that you have inside, because that stuff that you have inside is affecting what you pour out into the world. When you think about that point, what are your best 3 strategies to really be able to help somebody begin building a better relationship with themselves?
I always tell people the first thing that I did to make me more self-aware was reading. I wasn't an avid reader in my childhood. I became more of an avid reader later in my 20s and 30s. So for me, was reading that brought so much self-awareness because I read different books and I'm like, okay, I can relate to that issue. I can relate. And it made me want to pick up more and more books. And then after reading, that made me notice that I need to seek therapy. So that was my second strategy that I used. I went to therapy. And from therapy, I still believe, they say you need a coach for business, but you can still have a life coach for your day to day things. So those were my three strategies: reading, therapy, and a coach.
Mm. So when you think about reading, therapy, and coaching, I think anybody needs all of those three things, right? We need to self-reflect. We need to go learn some things. I put out something a while ago about the three things that you need in life, and it's capital, consistency, and competency.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that competency is probably number one, because you got to know something.
Right.
And I love what you said, is that when you started to read, you started to read perspectives and knowledge, and then it's like, I got some issues here. Or
Right.
maybe there's different ways that I could be doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you actually, surrendered and say, hey, I'm going to go to therapy. And
Right.
it's like, well, through therapy, then you start getting challenged, and it humbles you in a sense and gives you other things. Well, to take me to the next level, I need somebody to coach me to the next level.
Right.
When you think
And to be
about,
coachable.
and to be coachable.
Yeah, you have to be coachable because you can have a coach and the coach can give you the full
Mm-hmm.
blueprint
Exactly.
and then you still stuck. So you have to be willing to be open to be coachable.
When you think about those three things, and when you think about the importance of being coachable, what did that do for you? Who did you become? Like, who were you before? And talk to me about the transformation of who you became now.
More self-aware that, like I said, my number one thing was communication. So now I listen to understand instead of listening to respond.
Mm.
And that's really big for something transitional that I went through. And that's how I'm able to get along in business, personal, family, with my children. And that was the biggest thing for me.
That's powerful. That's powerful. One question that I continue to get asked, and I'm reading different books, and I've completed my goal for the first half of the year is to read 21 books. So I'm knocking out one book a week. And in the first three books, the question that continues to come up is, what is the season that you're currently in your life? And how do you get to, in order to get to that next season, you got to close out this current season. There's never been a time in life where it's winter and it's summer at the same time, ever.
Right.
It's a specific season that you're in. So if you were to define the season that you're in, as you're going through your growth process, how would you define that season?
Oh, that's transitional. I say now I'm more open to, like, for me, the biggest thing, my goal this year, I'll just say one of my biggest goals this year, and I noticed that I'm working through it, is I said I had to make myself more present via social media.
Mm. Okay.
And that's something, so I tell myself, you have to do a video today. You just have to do it. This is a part of my everyday, things that I have to do. So that's what I do. So that's one of the big things for me that I'm transitioning to, putting myself in more rooms.
Mm.
So now what I'm doing is just the more collaboration, the more networking. So my season right now is, I'll say, networking, collaboration.
Exactly. I love that. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine earlier today, actually, and we were saying that this whole ideology of planning,
Hmm.
I have a 10-year plan, I have a 5-year plan, I have a 1-year plan, all those different things we wish we could just scrap. Because
Hmm.
if you can't operate in your highest level of excellence and efficiency today, it doesn't matter how amazing your plan was. If you can't conquer the day, you're never going to be able to achieve what's on that plan.
That's right.
When you think about what is hindering or distracting your ability to be as productive as possible today, what are the gaps in your life today, and how are you working through those gaps as an entrepreneur, as a coach, as an author, to being able to overcome those things?
Oh yeah, my schedule. I have a digital schedule. I have a paper schedule that I go by, and do a lot of setting timers on my phone. So, this is the time that you work out from this time to that time.
Mhm.
That's what's really helping me be more organized.
Mhm.
And I don't like to um, tell clients or my readers or anybody that I'm coaching, do this, and I'm not practicing it. So I practice it and be strategic with it so I can give them more insight on it when I'm preaching it to someone else.
I think all that sounds like to me is integrity and character. I
Yeah,
think there's so many people that are preaching things that they don't do. They're,
yeah.
trying to motivate people in places that they're not even motivated in.
hmm
So talk to me about the importance of integrity and character as you're building your business as well.
Oh yeah, that's very important to me. I'm big on like people not returning phone calls and text messages. So that's like for me, my integrity is like I want you to know that I'm going to respond.
Mm,
Even if I say, I tell people all the time, put at the bottom of your email that you'll respond in 48 hours. Or your team will respond within 48 hours. Something to give back feedback.
exactly.
I just think that's important.
Now, where did you learn that?
My personal organization skills. If you ask my family, I always say there's a place for everything. So that's just my personal organization skills.
I asked that question because there's so many things that we learn in other jobs,
hmm
in other places. I was reflecting on something yesterday when I was riding in the car, and I was like, I learned how to sell products because I've done it in specific positions that I actually took for granted at the time.
hmm
And I worked for this technology company on 24, and it was a cloud-based phone service, and we were selling essentially the cloud-based service to businesses. Interestingly, I use now I'm on the other side, so now I have people calling me trying to sell me cloud-based phone services. But I took it for granted, cold calling and prospecting and going through a sales script and all these different things, not really knowing what I took for granted prepared me to be excellent in it years later.
That's right.
When you think about your life right now, what have you taken for granted throughout your life that has propelled you to perform at a higher level today?
Oh, I worked in healthcare for over 25 years.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I think what I took for granted was interacting with all the different personalities. I noticed that I use those techniques of working with all those personalities and having different patients with different personalities. I implement it now in my life now as a coach.
Mm,
Um, and I pay attention to body, how people react, facial expressions, and those are things that I had used in my 25 years in the healthcare field. So I
exactly.
utilize that now.
What do you think one skill is, 25 years in healthcare and just in general, 25 years of doing anything, of just life in general is valuable.
Yeah.
What is the most powerful lesson? If you could only take one lesson with you, what is the most powerful lesson that you've learned over your years of living, that if you could only operate in that one thing, you would do it?
Um, I tell everybody about me working in healthcare, do not take life for granted, no matter what the age is,
That's good.
because people lose their children and their parents. So from 0 to 99, anything can happen to you at a blink. And people say, well, they see this and that on the news. When you work in healthcare, because I worked in trauma, you see everything. And
Exactly.
it's more than what's being, talked about on the news.
Exactly.
So live every day to the fullest, because we don't know when our last day will be
Mm.
here, or when the last time you'll be with your family member.
I was reading Halftime by Bob Buford, and one of the questions in there was, if you could live an absolutely perfect life, what would that look like for you? What would you say perfection looks like for you in your life?
Oh, perfection looks like that I can travel all the time. That's what I enjoy, like with no limits. If I could just travel all the time. Um, but yeah, basically just carefree. That
What do
would
you think stops people from living in that specific place?
obligations.
Mm,
Um, we have so many obligations. We have work obligations. We have children obligations. We have obligations of taking care of our parents.
mhm.
So we're not always that free to just go out and do what we want whenever we want to do it.
When you think about this ideology of obligations versus opportunities, I think all the time that if I have to, if I look at it as an obligation, I shouldn't be doing it. Like my son, I don't ever look at that as an obligation because I actually love being a father. When I
Mhm.
look at my business, I'm not really once I feel like it's an obligation, I'm delegating it to someone else. So when you think about obligations versus opportunities, what would be your recommendation on somebody minimizing their obligations so that they can only operate in the opportunities that they want to create in their lives?
You said a key thing is delegating it to someone else.
Got it.
I think, especially in business, I think we have a lot of entrepreneurs who are saying to themselves, "Well, I don't trust that person to do it the same way that I would do it." But you can't get to that next level if you don't delegate it.
Mm,
So then you feel obligated to do this and this and that. You can never function just by yourself. You gotta have a team, you gotta ask for help.
exactly.
So that's where we will feel obligated because then at that point it's not something that we're enjoying, it's something that we know we would have to do.
When you say that, what are the top few things that you can delegate better in your business that are stopping you from really being able to travel all the time?
Oh yeah, soon it's coming, social media. Social media. I was just having a conversation with a friend about this earlier this morning.
Mhm.
Delegating social media.
I think
It
that,
becomes very time consuming.
yes, I think that is my biggest distraction. I think a lot of people's biggest distractions, because we have great intentions to get on there and create valuable content.
Hmm.
Once we're on there, it's kind of like there's this pool and this mall of distractions
Yes.
that create danger towards the actual destination that we're trying to go.
Right.
But one thing that I really am, I'm thankful for us to be on the call because your story is amazing. And I think a lot of the dangers that other people are going through in their lives, especially women, they need what you're offering. They need what you're saying. They need what you're doing. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you're helping women remove the dangers, remove the triggers, remove the baggage from their lives, so that you could be able to propel them towards their success?
My first book, I shared my first book, Emotions of the Mind. I shared the different things that I went through and steps that I used when we talked about the reading, the therapy, and the coaching. Um, I talked about that in my first book. Now I just recently released a book called Healthy Boundaries. And just because you take all those steps is one thing that my therapist taught me is that you have to have certain boundaries that so you feel like nobody's violating you and manipulating you. So that's what took me to my third book that I've just written about healthy boundaries. And then I have a brand called Mental Health is Non-Negotiable because our mental health is non-negotiable. You have to be in the right mental space in order to move through whatever part of your life it is. If you going to work every day, if you're a parent, because even though like me, I have 3 kids, so it's still a time and place that I need to take out time for myself. And that's what I want women to know is that you have to take out time for yourself. So you are pouring into your children the way that you need to on a positive level. Because if we're stressed out, then we're going to get stressed out with them. And you don't want that.
There's somebody right now, and I say this probably on every podcast because I really want to nail down the point of speaking directly to the person that you want to be able to speak to. There's somebody right now, that woman that is struggling. You've probably coached her. You've probably seen her. She's probably bought one of your books, or you've probably seen her in passing and just felt that
Mhm.
energy that you connected to immediately. And you remember that person because probably there was one day where you were that woman.
Mhm.
If that woman was standing right in front of you, or if that woman was listening to this podcast right now, what would you say to her to be able to help encourage her? And what steps would you give her to be able to help her get on the other side?
I'm gonna still go back to reading because for me, when I was that woman, I couldn't afford therapy
Mm,
or afford coaching. And that's something that deters people. They say, well, I can't afford that. But a book can cost you anywhere between $12 to $20. And if you pick up that book, you just have to be strategic about taking the time to read that book. Because and then a lot of people don't want to go to family or friends either and tell them what's going on. So that's why I always go back to reading, because reading will give you that self-awareness.
When you think about a few books that really advanced you, I know you're an author, so you're going to recommend
Yeah.
your books first. When you think about a few books that really advanced you, mine would be The Prince by Machiavelli, Atomic Habits by James Clear, definitely The One Thing by Gary Keller, and Halftime by Bob Buford for sure. Those four books, I believe, could get anyone on the right track.
Hmm.
You think about a few books in your life that have really gotten you on the right track. What would those books
I
be?
will go with the authors because most of their books are the same.
Mhm.
So I'm going to say Ilana Van Zandt,
Of course.
uh, Joyce Meyer. That was very profound for me.
Mhm.
Trying to think of someone, but I know those two really got me over the hump a lot of different things I was feeling and going through. Um, and of course, like you said, I'm gonna say my book, of course. Mine, but yeah.
When you talk about, your book, when you think about it, right? I think so many authors go through a process to write their
Mhm.
first book. And I feel like I've been hearing this often, especially on the podcast, that you go through a lot of unpacking when you're writing your
Oh
book.
yeah, yes.
Could you talk to us about, somebody that's interested in maybe writing their story, they went through something and they want to put it down. What did that process do for you, writing your book and then releasing it to the world?
It was therapeutic for
Mm,
me. One, because when I wrote the book, I had to dig deep into things that had happened, and then when you're writing it down and you reading it back or you going over it with your editor, you're like, wow, that really did happen to me. So it was therapeutic for me. Now, what I would tell other authors, aspiring authors to do is, yeah, they're gonna have to dig deep because you start thinking about things. And because, like for me, I had a writing coach back then, and she was like, okay, so what happened next? So that's why I was like, wow, I forgot about that. I forgot about this happened. I forgot about that. Or it's not that you forgot, you just tucked it away.
exactly. And you don't really ever deal with it.
Yeah,
And I think writing the book allows you, or kind of forces you or pushes you to deal with some things that you've probably just buried. Um,
right.
when you think about your writing coach, kind of pushing you to ask yourself, what is next?
Hmm.
What is next for you now? You have multiple books, you have a business, you're a coach, you're inspiring women from around the world.
Hmm.
What's next in your journey?
Wow, what's next on my journey? Well, right now I'm in the process of opening a bookstore
Okay.
here in Michigan.
Okay.
So that's what I'm working on right now next. So because I want to have events for women, I want to have conferences based around my topics that I talk about.
That's powerful. One of the questions, I do dinners at my home every month, once a month on the first Friday of every month.
Oh wow.
And for entrepreneurs, and they come in from different places. And one of the questions that we asked at the last dinner in January was, what is one thing that you're working on that inspires you?
Hmm.
Would that be that one thing for you, or are there other projects that you either are working on or thinking about working on that really inspire you to do?
I'm thinking about working on some others, but I want to give this my full attention right now because
Like
this is my next project. So yeah, that's why I say that'll come further down the line. But right now, I'm just working on the bookstore.
if you had 60 seconds to share any message with the world that every single person had the chance to hear, what would you say?
Um, I always say mental health is non-negotiable, and whatever you're going through is always a exit, is always an expiration to it.
I love that. Tamela, I really see great things from you.
Thank you.
I really believe that your books, your courses, your program, your coaching, your ability to change and inspire and empower women is absolutely admirable. And anybody listening right now, whether you're a woman or a man, I want you to go follow her. I want you to subscribe to whatever it is that she's doing, and I want you to invest in her because I think there's a lot of people that follow and never invest, and then you wonder why your transformation hasn't happened yet. So I
Yeah.
want you to actually invest in yourself, not just time, but actually your coin as well. Tamela, where can we find you?
I am on Instagram at Tamela C. Todd, and my website is tamelatodd.com.
What is one word to describe what success means to you?
Oh, wow. I like that question. Success means to me is free time.
I like that. What is one word to describe what fulfillment feels like to you?
Oh, peace.
What is one word to describe how your story will change lives?
Impactful.
And what is one word to describe the woman that you've become?
Oh, wow. Confident.
This is the Writer's Game podcast where we help you magnify your voice and monetize your message. I'm your host, Kyle King, and we're here with the Tamela Todd, and we'll see you guys next episode.
Thank you.